It's episode 24 of the All the Stops podcast. That means there's one for each hour of the day, which means the next day that you're feeling a little blue, feeling a little bit bored, you can just put on the entire run of episodes, starting from number 1, and see how long you make it. But we're really glad that you're with us, and if you've listened to all the episodes, thanks for sticking around. If you're one of our new listeners, thanks for listening. We hope you enjoy this show. And we hope that you'll like it, subscribe, and share where you can. The show is growing. Thank you to those of you who've jumped on Patreon to help support the back-end costs of this show. But we're having a great time. We're talking fascinating people, and today is no different. Today is Susan Jane Matthews. And she had and continues to have a really, really impressive solo organ career, but church music, sacred music, and is in the Episcopal Church. Not only that, she is the incoming president of AUM, the Association of Anglican Musicians, I think is currently vice president. And today we're talking about a really innovative thing that she spearheaded, which is called A Great Host of Composers. It's an online database dedicated to women composers and the work that they have done, and drawing attention to. They've always been there. They've always been present. Their music wasn't programmed for a long time because they were being ignored, sitting in plain sight. It's funny historically. Sometimes they'll find new, like, oh my gosh, we've discovered this composer, Elizabeth Turner or something. And it's like her music was just sitting on a desk. And at the time of her death, she was considered, one of the greatest keyboardists in Ireland. And then people just didn't pay attention, right? But it's so fascinating to be able to go back to the past and find music that was just there. It was there. It was wonderful, amazing music. We really get into it today and talk about the state of affairs, the progress that's been made in programming more music by women composers, but also new music being composed. And it's composition week 2, really, because we had Jessica French on last week, a wonderful composer. Fascinating conversations with Susan, and I just love the way she talks about it. She's a thoughtful person. She's a brilliant person. And I learned so much today. So I'm going to stop talking. We're going to go straight into our conversation with Susan Jane Matthews. Susan, thanks for being with us today on All the Stops. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Oh, I'm well because it is not as hot as it used to be. The cooler weather came through, and so I don't have my air conditioning unit on. There's no noise pollution, and I'm not sweating. I'm very happy. Where does this podcast find you at the moment?
I'm in gorgeous San Francisco. Just
Okay.
back from a trip in Northern California to Jenner.
Okay, so you've been enjoying very nice weather and continue to, I trust?
Yes.
The microclimate, they call it, I think, in San Francisco, right? It's always like just perfect. It's never too hot, right?
Tourists can be surprised about how cold it is in July, but right now we're having a really beautiful time.
Beautiful. Well, I'm so happy you're with us today, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation. We've got a lot to get into, but before we talk about some of your projects, just tell us a little bit about yourself, where you are, and how you got to this place.
Yes, it was sort of a long, meandering journey, but I grew up in Pennsylvania in Wilkes-Barre. Was able to study organ with Mark Laubach there at St. Stephen's, where he still works. I'm always be grateful to him. I went off to Haverford College, mainline Philadelphia, studied chemistry, and sort of had two lives. By the time I got to be a senior at Haverford, I had applied to medical schools, but I was also giving a senior organ recital, and one of my teachers pointed out to me, wow, there's somebody also named Susan Matthews who's an organist. So they had no idea I had these two lives going on. And after 1 year of medical school, I had found St. Mark's Locust Street in Philadelphia, and Wesley Parrott opened the organ to me to practice and then to assist him. And that was the end of my medical career because I just decided that was what I wanted to do, and ended up applying to music schools. Went to Eastman, studied with David Higgs, and it was somewhere at Eastman that I heard the Demethieu Te Deum, and that was really the start of, wow, there are actually amazing women composers. Why haven't we been talking about these in class? And did a lecture recital on her, and that really started the journey of exploring more music by women composers. That finally brought me to The Great Host, but that skips over quite a few years. Moving west for my first job, St. Michael's, Boise, Idaho, and then coming to San Francisco, working at Grace Cathedral for 4 years. And then my current position, which I just finished my 21st season at St. Paul's Episcopal Church in Burlingame, California.
Can you just tell people a little bit about the your current job? Tell us. I mean, and you can get nerdy. You can tell us about the instrument. People like to hear about the pipe organs.
Yes. Well, we're very lucky to have a 1929 Skinner organ, and it is a modest size organ, but it is just perfect for St. Paul's. It has a lot of color, um, and it is only two manuals, but both are enclosed, so you have a lot of flexibility, and you can really accompany a choir well on it. In after 2 years at St. Paul's, there were just so many children in our parish at that time, 2007, and not a children's choir for them. And so we formed a choir school, but it didn't become a children's choir. In fact, in our first rehearsals, I asked the children at that time like what they wanted to be called, and they vetoed children's choir. Nope. And so our goal has been the whole time to offer youth training so they could stand next to an adult and sing at an equal level. And so we have a wonderful choir school. It's an after school program. There are, we decreased a little bit in numbers after the pandemic, but there seems to be a really great more interest in coming back to choirs already at this point. So I think we'll have around 20 youth in the fall. And
Wow.
we have programs from offerings from TK through high school. And of course, one of the great blessings at being there so long is to have alumni now. I was just texting with one of them, my favorite alumni, Michael Caraher, and who has a wonderful career as an organist and went to Interlochen, and it's a real blessing to see them. When we travel around, we go to St. Mark's Cathedral, Seattle, to sing, and there's Joey Blundell singing in the choir there.
Oh, that's amazing. So it sounds like a robust story of mentorship and direction and working with youth, and really something that you've been passionate about. I love to hear that. You mentioned earlier now, and I want to pivot over to this now because it's so fascinating. I think it was just during the pandemic, right? You started Great Host. Was it sort of a pandemic project, or was it something you'd been working on anyway, and then the world went haywire?
Yes, it was definitely made possible by the pandemic. And it really came from an idea, a question from Bruce Neswick. He was currently at Trinity Cathedral, Portland, and Bruce has a way of asking questions that you just feel like you have to fulfill them. And Susan, I know you're interested in women composers, and I'm having trouble filling out my anthem schedule. And couldn't there be a listing like we have of other, well, of male composers? Because that's basically what we had at that point. And the pandemic came along, and then incredible women who have very tight schedules, who would never be able to contribute to this, had time to do it. So I so I had we had an incredible team: Carolyn Craig, who's now at Wells Cathedral, Marissa Hall, Lynn Lowy, Sarah McDonald, Louise Stewart, Brian Woods Lustig, our one guy, and Janet Ye. So it was an amazing, amazing team, and it was really a gift of the pandemic that we were able to do that.
So I said a little bit about it in the intro, but let's just kind of describe it, and from its mission statement in your own words here, you would call it a resource, right?
Yeah, it's definitely a resource. It's so for every Sunday of the church year, it lists possible anthems you could sing by women composers, and it's currently on a Google spreadsheet, and it has a lot of information. So you could just go to Advent 1 Year A and see a list of suggestions. You see the composers, links to their websites, their years, recordings, and I do my best to really keep that up to date. Um, and it's just such a pleasure to see such a flourishing of both publications of music we didn't know about, of things that were written in the past, and then a lot of new works and commissions. And people are composers continue to write to me and ask, would you consider these pieces for the database?
How widespread is the database? I remember when we talked at I think the last convention, and we made a TikTok. The oldest music that exists is written by a woman. This is Susan Jane Matthews, and she's going to tell you about some music you might not have heard about.
I founded Great Host of Composers in 2020.
And what is Great Host Composers?
It's a resource for music by women.
Cassia, right, in Constantinople, would be the earliest composer that we have a written manuscript for. And this database at this point includes 275 composers, adding more every day.
What do you use to decide if you're adding somebody? Do you ever go find composers and say, hey, could we add you to our database? Or do people approach you more?
When we first put it together, it was more us reaching out or drawing on things that were already available. We're very careful to pick things that you can find the score for, because it's easy to name a lot of things that you can't find the score for, but increasingly it's easier to find the scores.
And sorry, when you say can't find the score for, do you mean it's literally not known, or it's been lost to history, or do you mean just not in the public domain, or not searchable?
It's not in any readable form, and we're not sure if we could share it with other people. And we found so many composers had things that, well, they hadn't self-published, and no one had published them. But that everything has changed so much. Look at Sela Publishing; they have the Sarah McDonald series, and when you go to an conference, there seems to be a competition between tables of who has the most music by women composers.
Hey, that's a good problem to have.
Yeah, I love it. Just rewinding to the Boston Conference before the pandemic, I was doing a reading session, and the focus was on using given publishers, asking them to submit things for consideration for the reading workshop. And when I did that, publishers were concerned that they really just, when I said I was going to do 50% women composers and 50% men, there was concern expressed that they didn't have much to give me.
Wow.
So that's, of course, that's totally changed today.
Right. Well, that's fascinating and really good that there's been progress. You and many others, and a lot of those names you mentioned early on, have been a huge part of making that happen. We got to take our first break. We'll be right back. Today's episode is brought to you in part by Ortloff Organ Company. With instruments from coast to coast, Ortloff Organ Company has gained a strong national reputation for new pipe organs built with meticulous attention to detail, placing the accompaniment of singing first and foremost. Based in Greater Boston, Massachusetts, their thoughtful restoration work, specifically of Skinner and Wurlitzer organs, has also gained high praise. Visit ortlofforgan.com to see their current, past, and upcoming work, and following them on Facebook and Instagram for frequent updates on what's happening in the shop. ortlofforgan.com. Today's episode is brought to you in part by today's episode, the All the Stops podcast on Patreon, where you can go on for a small subscription fee, get an ad-free version of the show, as well as some bonus content coming soon, and support the back-end costs of making this show possible. If you love what we do here, we would love it if you would consider throwing a couple of bucks our way and supporting these great conversations about the pipe organ and how it works and who plays it and all that good stuff. If you're listening, you know why you're listening. Anyway, patreon.com/allthestopsmedia. Throw a couple bucks our way. It would help a lot. Thank you for listening to the show, and thanks for supporting what we're doing. An incredible resource then, and something where people can jump on and find useful stuff liturgically, very Google searchable, and I'm sure you've heard from a lot of people how they've been using it. But what's interesting, we were talking in the break, is that this resource has even changed your work. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, it's really changed it tremendously in the repertoire. We sing at St. Paul's. Our youth have no idea that 20 years ago, a typical choral music list in an Episcopal church would include perhaps Elizabeth Poston, Jesus Christ the Apple Tree, some Hildegard, and not a lot of other women composers. And so we have, one of the things I love to show people auditioning for the choir is they walk into the choir room, and on the back wall, they see a composer timeline. And these are all portraits by Margriet van der Zwaan. And it starts with Cassia, and it goes through composers we've commissioned. But it's not just women. It includes Felix Mendelssohn and Mozart and Beethoven and Bach. So everyone can see, the broad picture of who was all working together. So everyone is visible. And every time we do a commission, we commission a new portrait and put that up on the wall. So one of the wonderful things of getting to know these composers that we added to the Great Host database was realizing also the gaps, getting to know more composers and the gaps in the repertoire, and what could we commission to fill those gaps. And I was so fortunate to have Marcia McCowan give us an estate gift, the seed money to allow us at St. Paul's to have an annual commission. And we've had 6 commissions to date, and coming up on our 7th.
Oh, tell us about that. Who have you commissioned so far?
Yes, we started with Melissa Dunphy, and she wrote a cappella Magnificat and Nunc Dimittis. All the other pieces are with organ. Margaret Burke, Erilyn Wallen, and that was before she was really famous as the master of now the King's music. Roxana Panumthnik, Shruti Rajasekar. The latest commission that has been completed is a new mass, congregation and choir by Sarah McDonald, and it's the Centennial Mass because St. Paul's is just celebrating 100 years. And the one in progress is by Lucy Walker, really rising star of the composer world. And she'll be setting a text by a poet who attends St. Paul's, Mia Ayumi Malhotra, who I've collaborated with a lot. This is her 3rd text that she's writing for us. Because I think in working with the database, I really found, okay, we've got the women composers, but okay, now I'm looking at the text line, I'm looking at the text column, and I'm searching for those women poets. So I feel like that's really still an area wide open to be looking more at women poets. So you're not just setting the same words over and over again by the same male poets.
Let's explore that further. I think you you sort of gestured towards this earlier, but there's been progress. There's been a lot of progress, and that the kids who are singing now can't imagine the world that was commonplace even in my lifetime. And I'm not terribly old, although I'm not terribly young. What is success for you ultimately? Do we get to that place where you say, well, someday in some year we've achieved it and we don't have to say like women composers anymore? Or is that not the goal? Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I don't know. My thoughts on that have changed a lot over the years. Of course, it's very hard when you're in the moment, and it's when you're down to 5 years, then you can see much more clearly. Sometimes you don't even know the path you're taking. I had no idea when we were doing this database that people would really respond to it and use it so much. I've really, really valued the creative projects we've been able to do at St. Paul's. We've written two original musicals with the choir school, and I wouldn't have been able to do that without working with Mia Malhotra. And we approached that. They're truly written by our choristers, and we approach that by watching documentaries and reading a lot of books. And we basically give them the structure of 5 scenes. We did this for Fanny Hensel and then for Florence Price. And Fanny Hensel was the first musical, and we had just a fabulous time with that. And we learned just so much about that time in history and why we didn't know about Fanny Hensel, why it took so long for those publications to come around. And then this spring we did the musical on Florence Price, and that was a real amazing delve into American history. We all learned so much about American history and the migration to Chicago and the Renaissance in Black music there, and her collaboration with Margaret Bonds, and of course with Marian Anderson, and that incredible concert on the Lincoln Memorial steps, and how much that just connected to where we are today. And just, yeah, that was very emotional to be telling that story about Marian Anderson ends up, forbidden to sing by the DAR in their Constitution Hall. And then thank goodness for Eleanor Roosevelt opening up the doors so she could give a concert on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, which they consider as then the real dedication of that spot. And 75,000 people attend.
Wow.
And that's how her signature piece became My Soul's Been Anchored in the Lord by Florence Price. So it was just so incredible to tell that story and how that resonated with our lives today.
There's so much education to do. People might grow too comfortable when they see that there is progress being made. You can't be blamed for thinking, well, maybe things are okay now. I'm seeing a lot of works by female composers being performed. I'm hearing lots of things out there. You have to keep looking and saying, well, I want to innovate in these texts here, or we want to do more of this sort of thing. People may not know this. In the popular music world, it's currently sitting, estimates are 87 to 91% of music producers are men right now in 2026 in the big money, big culture shaping popular music sphere. It's 9 out of 10 music producers are males right now. It's kind of shocking. I will remind you that it's not 9 out of 10 humans are men, actually. So it's really not reflecting the population of humans here. How do you? I want to tease this out further, and it's you may not have your kind of final answer there, but where would you like things to be within the next 10 years? You know, it's been 20 years of growth. So say 20 years from now, what makes you happy if you can project out there?
Well, thinking locally, I'm talking to you from a block from Grace Cathedral, San Francisco, and they're, of course, they have an incredible men and boys program, and it's only 2 years they've had a girls' choir during Jared Johnson's tenure. So, thinking about in relationship to the popular music world and the leadership in my little corner of the Episcopal Church, uh, leadership, while you see a lot of women clergy, you're still not seeing women cathedral musicians in the really large positions. There's just a handful of women doing that. So, why is that part of our church so slow to change? And again, very locally for me is seeing the girls at Grace Cathedral have the same opportunity as the boys. I wanted from the start for them to have a full-time musician dedicated to them. And Joy Leilani Garbut's doing a fabulous job, but she's just part-time. Why is that? When so many resources, when the boys have a whole school, why is that?
So many people are working so hard to try to close this gap, and men as well. I think of Walden Moore we had on the program, who poured so much of his energy into building the girls' choir quite a while ago.
Mm-hmm.
I think of my colleague at Worcester Polytechnic Institute, who directs the festival chorus, is 130, 140 students, but he worked really hard to get an endowment that was a proper endowment for what was previously Alden Voices, what was the women's chorale. And what are other ways that people who might hold those positions now, men, let's say, how can men be allies? How can men help change this into the dream world of 20 years from now?
Well, I mean, if you're a person in power, I guess, I often see that true of all of us. When we find a position of power, sometimes we forget those goals we had. We were in a weak position. So to really hold on to those things. And I think that's really important thing to remember for women, and perhaps for women clergy. They've really found a great path to having a lot of positions. And are they continuing to help out the musicians that are their employees?
You mentioned, and we need to take our last break here, but you mentioned, you called it your little corner in the Episcopal Church. And then you've been talking about influence and power, and I think it's important to point out now you are the can I say this? You're the incoming president for
Yes, the vice president, who's the president-elect. So I'll be.
So you're president-elect. You're the current vice president, but you'll be the president of the Association of Anglican Musicians, and you will have more influence over all of our colleagues than almost anyone in some sense. You'll be leading that organization that is the collective. And so we're going to take our last break, but when we get back, I want to ask you, what will you do in that role? Because it's not a little corner. This is the top, and you're about to come into a place where you're going to make some change. So we'll be right back.
You know, Anitra, they say the organ is the king of instruments.
They do. And given that the king of instruments is the inspiration for All the Stops Media, maybe this podcast network is the king of networks.
It's possible. What I do know is that people who like organ or church music or classical music or whatever they're currently listening to on this network are pretty smart people.
Yep, but smart people don't know everything. And that's why it's helpful that people like us make podcasts to talk about the things we know a lot about. Because we know smart people are smart, so we can help them be smart about more things. In our case, board games.
You got it. We're Andrew and Anitra, married parents of 3, and for 10 years we've been talking about playing games with our kids and encouraging you to play games with the kids in your lives. And don't worry, even if you don't know what games are out there, it's more than just Monopoly.
Almost 2,000 games come out every year.
We're here to tell you all about it.
Because we know smart people like organs, but they also probably like board games.
You can find the Family Gamers podcast wherever fine podcasts are sold.
And all over social media at Family Gamers AA.
So we'll see you there, and play games with your kids.
It's a lot easier to critique something from amongst the lowly ranks, and then you can find yourself suddenly in charge of something, and it becomes a little bit of a different perspective. We were talking about this in the break. Fortunately, you are building on excellent work, and there's been incredibly strong leadership at and my sense is that it's running really well. It's a well-oiled machine. And I think if you just came in and you just kind of kept things kind of running smoothly, that would be enough. That would be fine. It would be good. But presumably, you as an innovator, you have a few things you want to do. Tell us what you can, even if it's just some general principles that you might kind of bring to this position.
Wow, thank you. Yes, I know I have so much to learn from the current president, Michael Kleinschmidt, and from all the current board, and they're just amazing. They had put together a fabulous conference this summer in Atlanta, and the membership is soaring. They now have free membership for students, which is so fantastic, and of course we still have work to do. So there were so many more women attending. When you have attended an conference in the past, and there's such wonderful hymn singing, group singing, and continues to be. The tenor and bass voices dominate, of course, the group, and so this is the balance is changing, but it's still, when you are singing hymns as a soprano or alto, you cannot hear yourself. And if you listen to the recordings from the conference, you can still hear that we have a long ways to go to include more women in the Anglican Association of Musicians. And they've done a great job in opening the door to membership, to making it easier to join. It's still a reflection, I think, of who's in the larger positions in the Episcopal Church who can afford to go to the conference. Though there are definitely scholarships, need-based scholarships available. So we're on a path to improving that. And if we could sing a hymn at a conference and the voices were balanced, I think everyone would be really excited about that. And I hear the women in our breaks talking about that all the time. And I hear the men talking about, oh, that was so great. Our hymn singing is so great. I'm not sure that we're listening. Listening is always so important. I guess the hymnal, it's hard not to talk about a hymnal that has 1982 on the cover. And I guess I can't let go of the dream that there'll be another hymnal printed, though I hear so much about the obstacles about that. And of course, it should come right after a new prayer book, which seems to be very hard to do. And a lot of emphasis on everything will be digital, and we don't need anything that's hardcover. And maybe they will show me that I need to understand that I need to let go of that. But working in a parish and working with all age choristers, and I know people have hymnals in their home, I just think it is still important to have a book that is a collection that's representative of what we're singing. And of course, the current hymnal didn't have many women, only a handful of women composers and poets. And there's our chance to diversify the hymnal in many ways, not just including women composers and poets, but more representative who's in the Episcopal Church today, and it's scary. I understand that we don't want to lose that hymnal is the reason one of the main reasons I joined the Episcopal Church. But it's time to move on from that hymnal.
Yeah, that's been. I am not an member, and I do want to become. I've been consistently working in the Episcopal Church for a long time, or at least an Episcopal boarding school, but the whole time since I think I was a teenager, and they were talking about a new hymnal, and it's been The Boy Who Cried Wolf for like, I mean, decades now. And they used to get new, I mean, people used to just do a revision of the prayer book and do a new hymnal, and then it seems like it's just stopped. And why is it so hard? So it sounds like you'll have a chance to really be a part of guiding the thought leadership spaces, where you'll have that kind of on the ground with the people who go back to the quote unquote big centers, the cathedrals, the boarding schools, and they are of course working with their deans and with their priests, and some of them of course will be involved in crafting that new hymnal. So you'll be able to really help shape the thought leadership there.
I will do all I can. Yes.
Yeah. I love the way you talk about it. It's open-minded, where you say, I'll let them make a case to me about an electronic version, but I'm gonna push back from my experiences, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. People need that hymnal in their home, and as you travel, that's the wonderful thing, right? If I travel to the East Coast and I go to the Episcopal Church, I want to see that new hymnal also in their pews, so we have that commonality in music that we know together.
Yeah, and it's also, I think we know by now that we look at too many screens. We spend too much time looking at screens in life, right? It's holding a physical book. I mean, and the studies are there too now. We can see that it's different. Your brain scans differently, and you're able to focus more when you have a physical thing like that. And we spend too much time with these screens. I'm so glad that you're going to be helping to guide this thing at the top. Again, building on wonderful leadership and on excellent work that people have done. But um, I want to be respectful of your time here. You've been so generous. The last thing is, you mentioned to me a really interesting, cool project that you're a part of, and I just wanted to ask you to share a little bit about that.
Oh, yes. Well, the title of it is What a Thing to Be With You. And this is a collaborative project with poet Mia Ayumi Malhotra, who I'm so lucky to have as the soprano in our choir at St. Paul's, and her two girls are choristers. And she worked with me in the two musicals that the choir school created on the lives of Fanny Hensel and Florence Price. And we decided that we'd like to collaborate even more outside of St. Paul's. And she has recently completed a collection of poetry called The Organ Sonnets. And as I read through them, she's been exploring the organ, especially ever since we went on residency in England at Wells Cathedral, and thinking about how all those pipes come together as she calls it a speaking forest.
I love that.
And what about that as a metaphor for how we come together as people and how we inspire each other? And so the music is three pairs of musicians, composers who really inspired one another in very different ways. And so she'll read excerpts from her organ sonnets, and then I will play music by, in the first set, Maurice Duraflé and Jean Aulas, of course, who were students at the conservatory together. Aulas killed at an early age in World War II, and Duraflé writes this amazing homage to him in the Prelude and Fugue on the Name of Allah.
That piece makes me cry. I get too sad.
Yeah.
when the clarinet comes back, and oh.
Yes. And so hearing music of Allah, his Phantasmagory, which is an early draft of litanies, and then litanies and Duraflé's Prelude and Fugue. Second section, two of my favorite composers, of course, Fanny Hensel and Felix Mendelssohn, and how those two extraordinary siblings, grew up together in Germany, exchanging ideas as children through their young adulthood, and then pulled apart by the social strictures at that time, that their musical paths were so different, but their music was always intertwined. And so hearing music from those two composers, and then coming to America with Florence Price and Margaret Bonds. And when Florence Price moved to Chicago at the time of the Jim Crow laws, she's escaping Little Rock, Arkansas, and really a scary situation for her and for her two daughters. She's broke, and Estella Bonds, Margaret Bonds, takes her into her house, and Margaret is her daughter. And that's how their collaboration starts. Estella Bonds' home was open to artists coming to Chicago. She introduces Florence to Marian Anderson. Florence gives Margaret composition lessons, and Margaret copies out scores for Florence. She's always needing help with her orchestral scores, and so they have this incredible collaboration. So yes, a shout out for What a Thing to Be With You with poet Mia Ayumi Malhotra.
Where will people be able to find that? Is that going to be online and recorded?
No, actually, we're looking for places to perform. So if you'd like a really innovative concert in your series, just write to me.
Oh, lovely. Okay, well, that's a great idea. Tell us where the upcoming performance of that's scheduled for your church. When is this?
We have one private recital at a private organ in San Francisco, and then we hope to be doing this where Mia teaches, St. Mary's College, Moraga, and then we're just developing our list of recitals.
Oh, perfect. Okay, well, we'll stay tuned on that. I'm very eager to hear how that goes, and I hope you bring it to New England.
I'd love to.
Yeah, lovely. Susan, thank you so much. So much great conversation today. And I just want to thank you for what you have done. It has been personally helpful to a lot of my colleagues and to me. And I really am grateful that you were willing to come onto the program today and talk about it a little bit.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
All right. Well, we'll stay in touch about that. And what's your website? Where can people go to see more?
Oh, right. It's just SusanJaneMatthews.com, and I'll make sure to update it with information about the Organ Sonnets concert.
Beautiful. Lovely. Susan, thank you so much.
Thank you. That was really fun.
All the Stops podcast is a product and trademark of All the Stops Media, LLC, and is recorded and produced by me, Wesley Hall. The music is written and recorded by me, too. Copyright 2026, all rights reserved. Thanks for listening.